Welcome to my channel. Locked away for over a decade, the top-secret Echo Serpent file was never meant to resurface until now. When Sergeant Keira Vale arrives at Fort Ashridge, no one knows the deadly past she carries, or the enemies already inside the walls. Betrayal, ghost soldiers, and a war hidden in plain sight ignite a battle where every move could be your last. I've been stationed at Forward Operating Base Sentinel for almost 3 years. Every morning, I serve breakfast at 0600, lunch at 1200, and dinner at 1800 to the elite soldiers here. To anyone passing through the mess hall, I'm just Emma Carlisle, the quiet cook with a polite smile and a neatly tied hairband. I keep my gaze low, and I rarely speak more than necessary. What can I get you? That's the persona everyone sees. No one suspects that beneath my apron lies a lifetime of training and experience that could turn a calm morning into a battlefield. That life, the one where I was Staff Sergeant Emma Carlisle of the 82nd Airborne Division, is buried beneath layers of flour, pots, and pans. I was once an airborne infantry soldier, a Ranger School graduate at the top of my class, an expert marksman, and someone who thrived in the chaos of war. But I chose the quiet, the mundane, the service that didn't demand life or death decisions every second. The transition didn't happen overnight. My final mission as a ranger, deep in the deserts of Jordan, changed everything. I had been ordered to neutralize a high-value target, someone the intelligence reports promised would make or break the operation. I completed the mission successfully, but the target was a boy, barely older than a child. That single moment left a scar deeper than any bullet wound. One medals could never erase. Promotions awaited me when I returned, but I asked to be reassigned. Away from combat, away from killing. My superiors didn't question me. They knew, as soldiers do, that some burdens are too heavy to carry indefinitely. So here I am, in the mess hall of FOB Sentinel, surrounded by the scent of sizzling bacon and fresh coffee, preparing meals for soldiers who don't know the half of it. SEAL Team 9 operates from this base, the finest warriors the nation has ever trained. They vanish into the night on missions that never appear in official records, and I watch them leave well-fed, ready for whatever danger awaits them. They call me Emma, sometimes even Mom, because I keep the coffee warm and the eggs just right. They don't know I've studied combat maps, memorized choke points, and prepared for scenarios far darker than spilled soup or burnt toast. I take pride in this quiet role. For 3 years, it's been enough to heal the invisible wounds, enough to remind myself that life doesn't always have to be a firefight. Most days, it works. I find peace in the rhythm of meals, the simplicity of service. Yet, beneath that calm, I maintain vigilance. I check every doorway, every shadow, every piece of equipment that could become a weapon if the worst happens. Preparedness isn't paranoia, it's survival. Some mornings, I slip under the industrial freezer, where I've hidden tools and weapons in waterproof cases, accumulated over years of careful planning. I hope I never need them. I tell myself hope is enough. But deep down, I know better. Today, like every other morning, I moved with practiced precision through the mess hall. Eggs sizzle, coffee brews, the aroma filling the small space. SEAL Team 9 files past in silence, polite but indifferent. Commander Nathan Hale gives me a nod as he passes, his sharp eyes reading the room for threats I can't always see. His second-in-command, Chief Petty Officer Miguel Santos, glances at me occasionally, noting the way I move, the way my eyes never stop scanning. He doesn't ask questions, he doesn't need to. No one here suspects that beneath the calm exterior, I am ready. Always ready. It was 0430 when I first sensed it. Most of the base was still asleep, the quiet punctuated only by the hum of generators and the distant calls of guards on patrol. I was already moving through the mess hall, checking doors, counting exits, making mental notes of every vantage point, every possible blind spot. My apron was on, my demeanor calm, but my mind was far from the breakfast orders I was supposed to focus on. The first explosion hit just as I cracked eggs for omelets. The walls shook with a distant, metallic thud, and the lights flickered. For everyone else, it might have seemed like a training exercise or an accident in the munitions storage. But my instincts screamed, this wasn't routine. The second explosion followed seconds later, precise, and deliberate. I froze for a fraction of a second, registering patterns I had learned to recognize in years of combat. The blasts weren't random, they were surgical. Someone knew the layout. Someone knew the schedules. The base alarm screamed. Shrill, deafening, impossible to ignore. Soldiers poured into the streets, weapons in hand, barking orders and moving into fortified positions. I stayed in the mess hall, slicing vegetables, stirring pots, the rhythm grounding me as I scanned through the chaos. My ears caught snippets of radio chatter, panic, confusion, urgent commands. The pattern was all wrong. This was coordinated, highly trained, and lethal. Through the mess hall windows, I saw them. Figures in black tactical gear, moving with calculated precision, taking advantage of weak points in the perimeter that should have been impossible to breach. Their movements were smooth, disciplined, soldiers, not insurgents. I counted at least 20, all armed with advanced weapons and moving toward the heart of the base. My stomach dropped. They weren't here to loot or to strike random targets. They were after specific people. SEAL Team 9. I didn't panic. I never panic. Years in combat taught me one thing above all. Panic kills faster than bullets, and routine anchors morale. I finished the omelets, placed them neatly on trays, and continued to scan, to calculate, to prepare. Beneath the industrial freezer, my weapons waited. My combat knife, my compact pistol, the breaching tools I had spent 3 years preparing. Today, I prayed I wouldn't need them, but my gut told me I would. By the time the enemy reached the barracks, SEAL Team 9 was outnumbered 4-1. I watched from the kitchen window, counting minutes as my team was subdued, not killed, but restrained. Non-lethal rounds, darts. The attackers wanted prisoners, not blood. Commander Hale was the first to fall, hit by a dart before he could organize the defense. Chief Santos held out slightly longer, taking down 2 attackers before being overwhelmed. Within 10 minutes, they were bound, dragged toward unmarked vehicles that seemed to appear from nowhere. My calm shattered, not with fear, but with purpose. I had spent 3 years hiding behind a kitchen counter, choosing peace over war. But seeing my people taken, the men I had fed, watched, and silently guided every day, ignited something in me that had lain dormant. I pulled off my apron, unpinned my hair, and reached beneath the freezer. The weight of the combat knife was instantly familiar, as was the feel of the pistol. Every movement carried lethal intent. I was no longer Emma Carlisle, the cook. I was Emma Carlisle, the warrior who had spent her life training for moments like this. The mission ahead was clear: gather intelligence, locate my team, and bring them home. The base may have been overwhelmed, but I had something no outside force possessed: knowledge of the soldiers themselves, their habits, their strengths, their instincts. And now, I had a plan. I stepped into the chaos, silent, lethal, invisible. I slipped out of the mess hall while the base was still in disarray. Smoke from the explosions hung low over the compound, curling around walls and vehicles, masking my movements. Each step was deliberate, measured, silent enough that even the trained eyes of enemy soldiers wouldn't catch me. I moved like a shadow, blending into the chaos, observing every patrol, every pattern, every weakness. The attackers had been meticulous. They knew exactly where to strike to neutralize communication lines and delay reinforcements. But they hadn't accounted for me, or for the fact that I had memorized this base like the back of my hand. Every choke point, every blind corner, every exit was ingrained in my mind. I could navigate it with my eyes closed. And I would. I made my way to the communication center. The building had taken a hit, but it was still functional enough for me to access the emergency logs. Every message, every timestamp, every failed transmission was a piece of the puzzle. I traced the sequence of the assault, piecing together what had happened. The attack was precise, professional, and deliberate. They hadn't come here by chance. They had been given information. An insider. The thought didn't surprise me, but it hardened my resolve. Someone here had betrayed SEAL Team 9, feeding the attackers everything they needed: schedules, layouts, patrol rotations. Whoever it was had done it slowly, methodically, laying the groundwork over months. My eyes narrowed as I scrolled through access logs, cross-referencing movements and shifts. Names flickered across the screen, but one stood out: Lieutenant Colonel Damon Rourke, the executive officer in charge of base security. He had clearance for everything, from personnel records to operational plans. And his financial records were suspicious, deposits aligning with the timing of intelligence leaks. The betrayal was complete and deliberate. I took a breath and shifted my focus. Identifying the traitor was only the first step. The second, the harder step, was finding my team before they were moved again. I studied maps of known enemy strongholds within a 50-kilometer radius. 3 options fit the profile: an abandoned mining facility nestled in the northern mountains, a long-deserted Soviet communications outpost to the east, and a cave network often used by insurgents in the region. The mining facility was exposed, the caves inaccessible with vehicles and too unstable. That left the Soviet installation, silent for decades but fortified, with hardened buildings suitable for holding elite prisoners. My gut told me that was where they were. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, I was ready. I gathered the gear from beneath the freezer: compact weapons, breaching tools, lightweight tactical packs, and a few essentials for survival. Each item was chosen for mobility, precision, and the ability to strike hard and fast. I didn't need an army. I only needed skill, patience, and the element of surprise. The terrain to the installation was treacherous, winding through mountain paths that would slow most soldiers to a crawl. But I had trained for this, learned to move silently through hostile environments, to read the land, to disappear in plain sight. By midnight, I was moving through the darkness, the base lights fading behind me, the stars above guiding me forward. Every step brought me closer to my team and deeper into danger. But fear wasn't part of the equation. Focus was, discipline was, survival was, and I had no intention of returning without them. The Soviet installation loomed ahead, a relic of a long-forgotten era, its concrete walls scarred but still formidable. Moonlight glinted off the metal framework of watchtowers and the edges of barbed wire fences. From my vantage point on a nearby ridge, I counted 30 enemy personnel patrolling the perimeter, all of them disciplined, well-armed, and unaware of my presence. I crouched low, letting the shadows swallow me. Every movement was deliberate, silent, and calculated. Years of combat had taught me how to read soldiers' patterns, how to anticipate a shift in their gaze, a step out of formation, a pause too long. I watched the rotations carefully, noting where the blind spots were, where communication gaps left openings. I slipped into the first shadow and moved toward the perimeter fence. A small gap at the corner, obscured by debris and shadow, gave me access. The wire scratched my gloves, but I ignored it, focusing on what lay beyond, the central building where SEAL Team 9 was likely held. I had memorized layouts from satellite images and old intelligence reports. Every doorway, corridor, and staircase was etched into my mind. I bypassed the first sentry silently, pressing a garrote to his neck and applying just enough pressure to drop him without a sound. His body slumped, and I dragged him into the shadowed corner. One by one, I neutralized the patrols, leaving them alive but unconscious. A rescue, not a vendetta. The central building rose ahead, fortified with reinforced doors and old electronic locks. The security here was tighter, but I had come prepared. Breaching tools in hand, I worked quickly, dismantling the locks, bypassing motion detectors, and overriding old wiring. Each failure could have set off alarms, but my hands moved with precision, years of training guiding every decision. Inside, the air was thick, the smell of damp concrete and machine oil heavy in my lungs. I crept down the hallways, counting steps, noting guard positions. Then I saw them, SEAL Team 9, huddled together in what had once been a communications hall. Their hands were bound, their faces a mixture of exhaustion, frustration, and surprise. Commander Hale's eyes met mine first. Recognition flashed, then relief, and finally respect. "Emma," he whispered, voice hoarse but steady. I stepped closer, slicing through their restraints with a practiced hand. "I'm here to get you out," I said, calm and controlled. No hesitation, no doubt. Once freed, the team shifted almost instinctively, their training kicking in even after capture. I guided them quietly through the hallways, neutralizing a few late-shift guards along the way. Every sound, every movement had to be perfect. We couldn't afford mistakes. One wrong step and all of us would be dead or recaptured. By the time we reached the perimeter, the first hints of dawn were brushing the horizon. The mountains provided cover, but the journey back to the ridge would be grueling. Still, I moved forward with them, every step measured, every breath controlled. SEAL Team 9 didn't need me to lead. They needed me to clear the path, to watch the angles they couldn't see, and to be the invisible hand guiding them through enemy territory. The mission wasn't over yet, but for the first time in hours, hope had a shape, my team, alive, moving with me toward freedom. The mountains were dark and unrelenting as we moved away from the Soviet installation. Every step demanded caution. Loose gravel, hidden rocks, and the constant threat of patrols kept my senses razor-sharp. I led the team in single file, their trust implicit, their instincts synchronized with mine. Even bound, even captured, they were lethal, but I knew we couldn't rely solely on their training. The terrain demanded strategy, stealth, and patience. I scanned the ridges and valleys with every step, noting every shadow that might conceal an ambush, every glint of metal that hinted at armed eyes watching us. My hands hovered near the weapons strapped across my chest, ready to act at a moment's notice. The team moved like a single organism, fluid and silent, following my lead, trusting the quiet cook who had suddenly become far more than she seemed. A sudden sound, a low crack, barely audible, froze me. I signaled for the team to halt. A patrol was closing from the east, armed and alert. I crouched behind a boulder, calculating the timing, the angles, the paths of least exposure. With a subtle gesture, I directed the team to split and circle around the ridge, using the terrain as cover. The enemy came closer, their boots crunching on the rocky soil. I waited until one of them stepped on a loose stone, the sound echoing faintly in the still air. It was enough. I struck, silently incapacitating him with a precise blow, his body folding into the shadow. Another followed, then another, every movement a calculated sequence honed over years. By the time the patrol realized something was wrong, the team had vanished from their line of sight. We pressed onward, the Soviet installation now far behind, but the threat never truly gone. My mind ran constantly, mapping contingencies, scanning for alternate paths, assessing fatigue, rations, and the likelihood of enemy reinforcements. SEAL Team 9 relied on me as much as I relied on their discipline and resilience. By early morning, we reached a small ravine that offered temporary concealment. I paused, crouching, breathing slowly, listening. The soldiers rested in the shadows, silent but alert, and I allowed myself a moment to survey the path ahead. We had several kilometers before reaching friendly territory, but the enemy could be anywhere. Every ridge and canyon could conceal eyes, weapons, and danger. A sudden flash of movement caught my attention. A small team of armed soldiers was advancing toward us, unaware of our position. I motioned for the team to remain still and silently drew my pistol. One by one, I neutralized the threat with silent precision, moving through the rocks like a ghost. When the last threat fell, we pressed on without a word. No one celebrated. There was no time, only the path forward. By midday, the first signs of friendly outposts appeared on the horizon. The team allowed themselves brief glances, relief hidden behind stoic expressions. I didn't relax, not yet. Danger could still come from anywhere, and I had promised them we would get out together. My focus didn't waver, and neither did theirs. Finally, we reached a small extraction point I had identified in advance, a concealed landing zone where a friendly chopper could retrieve us. We were still in hostile territory, but for the first time, the odds had shifted. SEAL Team 9, once prisoners, were now free, and I had led them back to safety with nothing but skill, patience, and determination. As the helicopter touched down, Commander Hale approached me, his eyes scanning my face for answers I wasn't ready to give. "Emma, how?" he whispered, awe and disbelief mingling in his voice. "I told you I'd get you out," I replied, calm, unwavering. No need for further explanation. The mission wasn't over, not yet, but our first victory was secured. We landed in the safe zone just as dusk settled, casting long shadows over the rugged terrain. The helicopter's rotors hummed as the team disembarked, and for the first time, I allowed myself to relax just enough to catch my breath. SEAL Team 9 moved with precision, still alert, but there was a subtle shift in the air, a sense of regained control. Commander Hale pulled me aside, his expression serious. "We need a full debrief, Emma. Everything." I nodded, guiding the team to a secure location where we could review the intel I had gathered from the installation and the base itself. The truth was as I feared. The capture hadn't been a simple raid. It had been orchestrated from within FOB Sentinel, a betrayal that stretched back months. Someone had fed the attackers exact details of our movements, schedules, and the defensive gaps. I accessed the logs I had copied during the infiltration, cross-referencing personnel access, financial transactions, and operational shifts. Every red flag pointed to one name: Lieutenant Colonel Damon Rourke, the executive officer responsible for base security. His clearance had given him access to everything, and his accounts matched the timing of each breach and information. I presented the evidence to Hale and Santos. It wasn't just negligence, I said, my voice steady. It was deliberate. He compromised the team. He knew exactly what he was doing. Hale's jaw tightened. Damon, he's been here for years. Trusted. How could he? His words faltered, disbelief etched across his face. I didn't need to finish. The betrayal spoke for itself. Santos leaned back, his fingers steepled. We have to move carefully. Exposing him too quickly could tip off other cells or collaborators. We'll need a plan, evidence, and timing. This isn't just about revenge, it's about preventing future attacks. I nodded. My role had shifted again. The immediate rescue was complete, but the next step required patience, strategy, and the same precision that had guided me through the mountains and into the enemy compound. The team debrief stretched long into the night. I recounted every observation from the Soviet installation, the patrol rotations, the guard routines, the weak points in their security. Hale and Santos absorbed it all, asking questions, probing for gaps, validating what I had seen. I could see the respect in their eyes, the realization that the quiet cook who had served them breakfast for years had just orchestrated their escape from a fortified enemy compound. By the end of the debrief, a plan was forming. Rourke's betrayal could not go unchecked. We would need to act carefully, to gather irrefutable evidence, and to ensure the safety of FOB Sentinel's personnel. The team trusted me implicitly now, not as a cook, not as support, but as a tactical operator, capable of navigating hostile territory and handling threats that even they might struggle with. As the team rested, I sat apart, reviewing my notes, tracing timelines, and thinking several steps ahead. This wasn't just about what had happened. It was about what was coming next. The enemy had resources, connections, and motivation. Rourke wasn't just a traitor, he was a gateway. And I knew I couldn't let him, or anyone like him, strike again. The quiet life of the mess hall was over. For the first time in years, I embraced the role I had trained for, the one I had buried under meals and routines. My apron and hair bun were gone, replaced by the readiness, focus, and resolve of a soldier who had no intention of letting betrayal go unpunished. Tomorrow, the real hunt would begin. The morning light filtered through the secure bunker's small windows, painting the walls in muted gold. I moved quietly, gathering the notes, maps, and intel I had compiled overnight. My team was alert but trusting, letting me take the lead. They still called me Emma, still remembered me as the cook, but now there was something else in their eyes, a recognition that I was far more than they had ever imagined. Rourke's pattern was clear. He hadn't acted impulsively. Every leak, every misstep, every breach had been orchestrated to avoid detection. He believed his careful planning was enough to protect him from discovery. He underestimated me. That was my advantage. I traced his access logs again, comparing timestamps with the movements of SEAL Team 9 during their capture. Every inconsistency, every anomaly, every delayed response pointed to predictable behavior. Rourke wasn't clever enough to cover all his tracks perfectly. He trusted that no one would notice, that no one would connect the dots as meticulously as I had. By midday, I had formulated a plan. It was surgical, designed to neutralize Rourke without endangering innocent personnel or alerting the enemy to our countermeasures. The operation would require precision, timing, and complete coordination. I briefed Hale and Santos quietly, emphasizing the need for patience and stealth. They listened, nodding, knowing better than to question the logic of someone who had already delivered them from captivity. We moved at night. Darkness was our ally as I led a small strike team through the outskirts of FOB Sentinel, avoiding the main gates and patrols. Every step was calculated, every breath measured. I knew the base's interior better than Rourke could ever anticipate. The corridors, the access codes, the security cameras, all were mapped in my mind. We reached his office. The door was locked, electronic, and reinforced. I bypassed the system silently, my hands moving with practiced precision. Every failed attempt in training had been a lesson. Every success, a reminder that patience was as lethal as any weapon. Within moments, the door clicked open. Inside, Rourke sat at his desk, papers scattered, unaware of our approach. I entered first, my presence silent but commanding. Hale and Santos flanked me, weapons ready, eyes locked on the traitor. Lieutenant Colonel Damon Rourke, I said, calm, steady, voice carrying authority. You've been feeding the enemy for months. Your game's in tonight. Rourke froze, shock and disbelief etching lines across his face. Emma, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, I interrupted. You compromised SEAL Team 9. You betrayed everyone under your command. And now, you're going to answer for it. He reached for a drawer. I moved faster, my hand closing around his wrist, twisting him just enough to drop the weapon to the floor. Santos secured him as Hale collected the evidence. I felt no satisfaction in his defeat, only a grim resolve. Justice here wasn't about revenge. It was about safeguarding the lives of those who trusted him, those who had fought and survived because of careful planning and unyielding discipline. By the time the extraction team arrived to remove Rourke from the base, I had already debriefed Hale and Santos on every detail, ensuring that no trace of his betrayal could remain hidden. The operation had been clean, surgical, and complete. I returned to the mess hall later that night, apron back in place, hair neatly tied. Breakfast would be served at 0600, lunch at 1200, and dinner at 1800. No one passing through would know what had happened. No one would suspect the quiet cook who had just neutralized a traitor and safeguarded the elite of the base. But I knew, and that knowledge, as always, gave me purpose. The base slowly returned to its rhythm after Rourke's removal. Soldiers moved with measured steps, patrols fell into routine, and communication lines hummed steadily once more. From the outside, FOB sentinels seemed normal. Breakfast trays clattered, coffee steamed, and laughter echoed faintly through the mess hall. I stood behind the counter, flipping eggs, arranging toast, and stirring coffee, but my mind was elsewhere. The mission had been a success, but the weight of responsibility pressed heavier than any battlefield I'd known. I had saved my team, exposed the traitor, and neutralized a threat, but at what cost to myself? SEAL Team 9 no longer saw me as just the cook. Commander Hale had a new respect in his eyes, and Santos' glances often lingered a second too long. They understood that the quiet woman preparing meals for them every day was capable of far more than they had imagined. Yet, to the rest of the base, I remained invisible, the friendly presence in the kitchen. I moved through my day with the precision of a soldier, monitoring base activity discreetly. Every face, every movement, every sound was a potential piece of intelligence. I checked the entrances, scanned the windows, and noted every deviation from routine. The base's safety now depended on vigilance, even in the quietest corners. The duality of my existence was both comforting and suffocating. In the mess hall, I was Emma Carlisle, the dependable cook who kept soldiers fed and morale steady. Outside, I was the operative who could strike silently, track threats, and protect lives with lethal precision. Both identities were necessary, yet neither felt complete alone. Hale approached me during the late shift, leaning casually against the counter. "You're different now," he said, almost as if speaking aloud a thought he had kept in check. "We knew you had skills, Emma, but seeing you act, it's something else." I smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "I've always had those skills," I said softly. "I just chose to keep them hidden. The mess hall, the routines, they give me peace. But when my people are in danger, I can't stand by." He nodded, understanding passing between us in the quiet hum of the kitchen. "You've saved lives no one will ever know about," he said, "including ours." I returned to my work, the clatter of dishes grounding me. There was pride in the mundane, strength in the ordinary, and yet an unspoken readiness simmering beneath the surface. Every soldier who ate at my counter was safe, not just because of the meals I served, but because of the vigilance I maintained silently, invisibly. Night fell, and the base quieted. I moved to the window, gazing at the distant mountains and the star-strewn sky above. The duality of my life, the cook and the warrior, was no longer a compromise. It was a balance. I could nurture, protect, and strike if needed. I could blend into the ordinary world while guarding it against the extraordinary dangers lurking beyond the horizon. And I knew that, no matter how quiet the mess hall seemed, I would always be ready for whatever came next. The calm didn't last. Weeks after Rourke's removal, whispers began circulating. Unconfirmed reports of enemy activity near FOB Sentinel, unusual movements along the northern supply routes, and chatter intercepted by the communications team. The base was on alert, but most soldiers treated it as routine precaution. I knew better. Even in the mess hall, my instincts prickled. Every delivery truck, every new face, every minor change in routine set off alarms in my mind. I had learned to trust the subtle signals the world offered. The way shadows shifted, the cadence of footsteps, the pause in a conversation that carried hidden meaning. Danger doesn't announce itself. It waits. And so did I. One evening, as I prepared dinner, I noticed a small anomaly in the access logs. A civilian contractor who shouldn't have been on the premises had cleared multiple checkpoints without proper identification. My pulse quickened. I didn't alert anyone yet. Observation first, action second. That was how I survived in Syria, how I survived in the mountains, and how I survived rescuing SEAL Team 9. I followed the contractor from a distance, slipping through corridors and shadowed hallways unnoticed. My eyes tracked every motion, my mind calculating possibilities and contingencies. By the time I cornered him near a storage facility, I knew what I had suspected. He wasn't a contractor. He was a scout, gathering intelligence for an external operation that could threaten the entire base. I moved silently, confronting him before he could act. He froze, realizing too late that the cook everyone trusted was far more than she appeared. A brief struggle ensued, but it ended quickly. He was restrained, silent, and under observation until military police could take over. But the incident confirmed my suspicion. Someone, or something, was testing FOB Sentinel. This wasn't random. This wasn't opportunistic. And it certainly wasn't going to stop. I realized then that my dual existence, cook and guardian, wasn't a choice anymore. It was a necessity. Every day, every meal, every glance through a window was part of a larger strategy to keep the base safe. Commander Hale found me later, cleaning knives behind the counter. "Emma, I heard what happened," he said quietly. "You handled it alone." I didn't answer immediately. My hands moved on autopilot, slicing, polishing, arranging. "Sometimes it has to be done quietly," I finally said, "before it becomes a problem." Hale nodded, a shadow of admiration in his eyes. "You're not just a cook. You never were." I allowed myself a faint smile. For now, the threat had been neutralized, but I knew it was only the beginning. There would always be someone testing the base, probing weaknesses, and searching for gaps. And I would always be there, watching, waiting, ready to act. The night grew quiet again, the hum of generators the only sound. I stood at the window, hands resting on the counter, watching shadows move over the perimeter. I was invisible to most, but to those who mattered, I was a guardian. Not a warrior in the spotlight, not a soldier with medals, but someone who ensured the unseen safety of those who were. And when the shadows stirred again, I would be ready. Weeks turned into months, and FOB Sentinel settled into a cautious routine. Soldiers carried out drills, patrols moved with precision, and the base hummed with the quiet efficiency that comes from years of disciplined operation. Yet, beneath the apparent normalcy, I remained vigilant, every glance, every observation, every action part of a silent defense. I moved through the mess hall as I always had, apron tied, hair in a bun, coffee brewing, breakfast at 0600, lunch at 1200, dinner at 1800. To most, I was Emma Carlisle, the dependable cook who ensured their bellies were full and their spirits steady. To SEAL Team 9, Commander Hale, and those who had glimpsed the other side of me, I was something more, a silent guardian, a calculated protector, the invisible hand keeping danger at bay. I had learned long ago that heroism often hides in silence. You don't need medals or recognition to make a difference. You need awareness, readiness, and the courage to act when it matters most. For 3 years, I had served in the mess hall, quietly learning routines, observing patterns, memorizing layouts. Those years weren't wasted. They were preparation. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the base in golden light, Commander Hale walked in quietly. He stood near the counter, coffee in hand, and looked out the window with me. "You've changed how we think about safety here," he said softly. "No one else sees it, but we feel it. We know we're protected." I smiled faintly, my hands busy arranging plates. "I don't need anyone to see it," I replied. "As long as they're safe, that's enough." The weight of my dual life pressed on me sometimes, but I had found balance. I could cook, nurture, and sustain, while also remaining ready to strike, to protect, to defend. Both sides of my existence were necessary, both defined me. And the team, unknowingly, relied on that balance every day. At night, when the base grew quiet and the stars stretched across the sky, I often stood at the window, reflecting on the choices that had led me here. The missions, the rescues, the betrayals, I carried them all silently. They shaped me, honed me, and reminded me that sometimes the most important battles are waged not on the front lines, but in the spaces between, where vigilance and preparation meet action. SEAL Team 9 returned to their duties, more confident than ever, their trust in the unseen guardian cemented. They called me Emma, sometimes cook, sometimes even mom, and each word carried a weight of respect and affection. They didn't need to understand the full extent of what I could do. They only needed to know I was there, and I would always be there. Beneath the freezer, hidden behind supplies no one else touched, lay another cache of weapons, tools, and equipment I hoped never to use. But hope was not a strategy. Readiness was. Vigilance was. Survival was. And I had learned that the greatest act of care is the willingness to be dangerous for those you swore to protect. The mess hall hummed with life, trays clattered, laughter echoed faintly, and the base slept under the quiet shadow of safety. I returned to my work, arranging plates, brewing coffee, and stirring pots. Invisible to most, indispensable to the few who mattered most. I was Emma Carlisle, the cook who could become a weapon, the caregiver who could transform into a fighter, the unseen guardian of America's finest. And in that quiet, deliberate existence, I had found purpose, balance, and peace. No one would ever record my name in history books. No medals would adorn my chest. But the soldiers who passed through my mess hall each day, knowing or not, were alive and ready because of the choices I had made. And that was enough.